Hello, everyone. My name's Elaine Clarke, and I'm the College Director of Education and Students at Lincoln International Business School. And I'm here to talk to you very briefly about one of my particular areas of interest in both research and the curriculum here at Lincoln. First of all, I want to ask you what this and this have in common. So this is, it's a cardboard box, but it's a rainbow-shaped cardboard box and very prettily decorated. So quite novel, not something you see very often in the way of cardboard boxes. And this, I'm sure you'll recognise, is a highlighter pen. So what they have in common is this is novel, this is useful, and together, novelty and usefulness are what creativity is all about. And that's what I want to talk to you about today, particularly about creativity in the workplace. So taking on that idea of novelty and usefulness, take a look at this. Now, in case you can't work out what it is, it's a funny shaped object that has a variety of coloured highlighter pens on it. So performing the same function as the highlighter pen I showed you. Certainly novel, you don't see many of these around, sort of a splash sort of shape. But usefulness, I have to confess, when I try to use it, it's actually quite irritating about where you put your fingers, and the ink doesn't flow very smoothly. So novel, yes. Useful, maybe not so much. So bear those two things in mind as we go forward and talk about creativity. So why is creativity important? Now, you may well have heard of the World Economic Forum, probably most recognised by everybody because of the Davos summit that are held there, where world leaders, politics, business, etc., meet to talk about some of the big issues of the day. Well, the World Economic Forum has for a few years now been looking at the future of jobs, and it's issued a future of jobs report and updates it on a regular basis. So the latest version was issued in towards the end of last year. And obviously there are tens of thousands of senior managers, senior HR directors, etc., who respond to this survey, in which not only are they looking at trends in the workplace, the extent to which jobs will exist in the future, etc., they specifically ask employers about the skills that they think they will need in 5 years' time. So one of those skills is still creativity. Has been creeping up the list, and it's still showing there. Creativity, innovation, initiative, originality are still skills that employers say they are going to need in the future. So we thought we'd have a look a bit more closely at this, because creativity is a big concept, and we wanted to understand a bit more about, if we're going to respond to what employers need, we need to know a bit more. Okay, so first of all, one of the things that we did was we asked them in a little bit more depth what they thought creativity was about, what it meant to them. And we gave them a whole long list of statements that they could strongly agree with or strongly disagree with. When we looked at that list and took the top 5 elements that they saw as being what creativity is about, they're these. Firstly, it's about mixing with people who are different to ourselves, often known as diversity. Diversity is actually a very key factor in bringing about creativity. So mixing with different people. Creativity is also about challenging assumptions. So it's about looking beneath the surface, not always accepting what is there, but looking deeper and asking questions beneath the surface. It's also about crossing boundaries. Okay, so you could say that ties in a bit with the diversity element, but also crossing disciplinary boundaries, crossing country boundaries, crossing cultural boundaries, etc. Bringing in different expertise, going and looking somewhere different to find the answers to what you're looking for. It's also about flexibility, about not being fixed in the ways that we look at things, the way we think about things. So flexibility is a key element of creativity. And finally, in those top 5, it means different things in different contexts. So if we're trying to bring about more creativity, we also need to look at what it might mean in that particular context. Creativity for an engineer, for example, may be very well different from creativity for a marketing professional. So that's what creativity is about. And actually, well, that's what employers see creativity as being about. And I do quite a lot of work with what we call post-experience learners, so people who are already in work and want to do further qualifications. So because we know they've got that work experience, something I ask them about is where they see creativity being able to work in their own organisations and in their management tasks. And when we start off these discussions, we sometimes get groups of people, groups of particular professions saying, no, I can't, I can't be creative. It's just not appropriate. One of those groups in particular is accounting. Let's say too many rules and regulations, we're bound by professional bodies, we can't be creative. But actually, when we start to explore that and say, okay, so what about working with people who are different? What about questioning those assumptions? What about asking somebody slightly different to who you'd normally ask about their view on a particular investment, for example? And when we further on in these discussions, actually, there has never been anybody who's held out and said, no, creativity is not applicable to my job. Because even if the outcomes are bound by rules and regulations, then the processes aren't necessarily. Or even if the processes are bound by rules and regulations, maybe there's some creativity in the outputs. So we can see that what the World Economic Forum are saying we need is actually applicable to a vast, vast range of things that go on in the workplace. I would even, be willing to say it's applicable everywhere. Okay, so having looked at what creativity is about and where it can be used, I have to say that when we did our research with employers, we did find some contradictions. So first of all, we did ask them, do you agree that creativity is becoming more valuable? And an overwhelming majority said, yes, it is becoming more valuable. However, when we asked them about, for example, their recruitment practices, where they fit finding out about creativity or people's attitudes towards creativity, there were hardly any who said that it's anywhere in their recruitment processes. When they're recruiting graduates, for example, they don't ask them to engage in a creative activity to demonstrate their creative skills. And we also asked of the respondents, how much creativity training have you had in the last 5 years? And 51% of them, so a majority, said they had had no creativity training whatsoever in the last 5 years. So that's a bit troubling. If creativity is so important and becoming increasingly important, why aren't we helping people? Why aren't we training them to be creative? And then we also said, okay, well, does your organization tell you what it thinks creativity is and what kind of, that it expects creativity? Does it have ways of identifying it and rewarding people who are being more creative? And only 25% across those range of questions said that their organization had anything in place. So we've got this problem where it's something we need. That seems to be quite widely recognized. and yet something's not quite happening as it should be. But there are some reasons to be cheerful, fortunately, in the research. Because we wanted to find out how fixed people's ideas are about people and creativity. And this is where we've got some hope for the future. So there were significant majority of the respondents who agreed that the more you use creativity, the better you become at it. Great. So let's use it more. Let's get better at it. The vast majority agreed that a person's creativity can be improved. Brilliant. Reinforcing that message. And they disagreed, again, a significant majority of people disagreed that creativity only occurs in certain individuals. No, they said, it doesn't only occur in certain individuals. And fortunately for people like me, who might be a little bit further on in their years, they also disagreed that creativity was the preserve of the young, because sometimes you feel that, oh, that's for young people. Oh, no, no, I've done my bit. That's for young people. Fortunately, employers don't agree. It's not the preserve of the young, and there aren't only certain people who can be creative. So we can be cheerful about that. We can do something about this need for creativity. So what we can do, I suppose the key question then is, what can universities do to help in this seeming sort of contradiction that we've got, and this very strongly expressed need for something to happen in the future, for the sake of people's jobs, maintaining jobs, creating new jobs, combating, if you like, what is the inevitable dominance of technology and growing artificial intelligence, etc., and the impact that will have on the jobs that we know. So what can universities do to help? Well, there's that recognition, of course, that people can be improved. So we can train. Universities, we do train people, we develop people. So we can train them very specifically for creativity. Now, quite a few of the skills, if you're working in a team and trying to be creative together, a lot of the things are the same as just good team management, like, having specific goals, setting priorities, setting milestones, etc. They would apply to any type of teamwork, as well as a team initiative where you really needed people to be creative. But there are some things that are very specific to creativity that we can train people in. So valuing diversity and its role in creativity. We can train people to help develop a more exploratory mindset, to be open to new experiences. So all of these things feeding into that diversity. We can train people to evaluate ideas constructively, because in order to be creative, we need people not to feel vulnerable. We need a supportive environment where people feel free to express their ideas and trust other people to assess those and feedback constructively, just as they're allowed to do to other people's ideas. So we can also train people into how you create that kind of supportive environment for people to work in order to be creative. How do you take other people's perspectives into account? Because again, that's part of that richness of experience that's important for creativity. And there's this expression called ideas elaboration. So not just ideas sharing, which is important, but ideas elaboration. So it's taking an idea and building upon it. So how can we train people to help build upon ideas? So lots there that we can do in the area of training. Other things we can do, we can open people's eyes to what it is that's blocking creativity. We can show them techniques that actually enhance creativity. There are loads of those techniques and they're invariably great fun to get involved in, as well as coming up with really, really useful solutions. And another thing that we can do, of course, we can mix people up. We can absolutely, very deliberately make sure people are mixed in their learning activities so that they get that different perspectives. We can give people time to get to know each other, to build up trust, etc. And a big thing in universities is how we assess our students. Now, bear in mind, I'm talking from a business school perspective. So we already do, a whole variety of different ways of assessing people, presentations, reports, role play, experiments, all sorts of things. But if you actually look at our assessment criteria, then often we've got a lot focused on showing the knowledge, but more importantly, applying the knowledge. We've got a lot on critical thinking, which is also a part of creativity. But in actually trying to reduce students' risks and get them to be more open in assignments that they do, it's not only about how we design that assignment, but what are we actually assessing? So instead of, have they shown they can apply every single bit of knowledge that we've addressed during this module, how about we assess them on the uniqueness of the ideas they've come up with, how attractive those ideas are? Can they see the links between the ideas? Can they show us how they might be built upon and how they could make those ideas into something that's actually workable? So you see, we can absolutely do our part in reducing students' risks and helping them to be more creative in their approach to their assessments. And then there's another big key area where we have a role to play, and that is in how we help to develop leaders, because leaders are absolutely critical in encouraging, maintaining, resourcing what is needed for creativity. So the kind of things that block creativity, like bias and stereotyping, if you like, they're the opposite of trying to get a diverse, rich, supportive environment. So leaders, we can help leaders to see where that bias might be creeping in, where they're inadvertently stereotyping, and they in turn can help to train their people. We can look at how helping leaders to develop external networks, because again, external networks brings in that richness of ideas and perspectives to a creative initiative. And we can certainly train leaders to do this. We can show them how you can create build up an error-friendly, if you like, environment where in certain circumstances, it's okay to make a mistake. We don't necessarily want our surgeons to be making mistakes, but in so many other areas, if we create that kind of environment, give time and give and reward people appropriately and give them the resources that they need, then, that learning from mistakes can absolutely be part of that process. So, and leaders, of course, are important in recognizing the contributions of people. So again, we can help to develop leaders who will recognize contributions that are taking a more creative approach, and recognize where a culture of creativity is being developed and reward that accordingly. So universities absolutely have a role to play in addressing what the World Economic Forum and other bodies, but the World Economic Forum is perhaps the better known and certainly one of the largest areas of research in this area. We absolutely have a job to do in addressing those skills of the future. So creativity and innovation, initiative, etc., are just one in a whole collection of skills needed for the future. But I would maintain, actually, if you look at some of those other top skills, like complex problem solving, like analysing data, like, again, building networks. I would maintain that if you build up your ability to think creatively and to support more people in recognizing that they can be creative and helping them to make a contribution, then creativity will help to build those other skills as well. So there's certainly something for us to do. And if you come to us in LIBS, you will see how very closely we're keeping an eye on those skills of the future and looking at our curriculum to make sure we are addressing those with both our staff and our all of our learners. And I just want to finish with one brief saying, which I love in particular, from Einstein, which is that he says, creativity is intelligence having fun. And I'll leave you with that thought. If there are any questions in the chat box, I'm very happy to address those, but please pop in your questions at any time and we'll pick them up and give a response on them. Lovely. Thanks ever so much.